The Democrats' tax on the middle class. This is how they inflate their way through deficit spending. I'm concerned we're in an inflationary cycle now. Even though people's wages have gone up, their wage gains are being wiped out by this inflation.
Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson decrying new economic numbers that show inflation hitting a nearly 40-year high in December, with consumer prices jumping 7%. Specifically, food and clothing up over 6%, gas up 51%, and the prices on used cars and trucks up 37% plus. All right, let's dig into the daunting economic numbers tonight with former Biden campaign surrogate Kevin Walling and former Trump economic advisor Steve Moore. Great to have you both back, and Happy New Year to you.
Hey, Shannon, Happy New Year. Good to see you.
All right, we'll start with something from the president. He said today, today's report, which shows a meaningful reduction in headline inflation over last month with gas prices and food prices falling, demonstrates that we are making progress in slowing the rate of price increases. Steve.
Boy, talk about putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, this was a pretty devastating report. It comes only a few days after Shannon. President Biden took a victory lap on the economy, saying he'd had the best first year ever. I didn't know he was saying that best first year meant, the highest rise in prices. And by the way, I'm old enough to remember 1980. I remember when those prices just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And the reason this is such a curse for this president and for the American people is that you're looking at wage gains over the last year, Shannon, of about 6.5%. I'm sorry, about 4.5% to 5%, and then inflation at 7%. That means, according to these new statistics, the average worker saw a real purchasing power decline in their paycheck. That is not prosperity.
This is a tough one for the White House, Kevin, and the new Quinnipiac polling shows that people are pointing the finger at the White House. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling the economy? Approve 34%, disapprove 57%. Kevin, what does the White House do with those numbers?
Well, Shannon, seriously, this is obviously a serious concern for the president in this administration. Inflation, as it said, is one of the cruelest tax increases because, as Steve knows well, it affects more often middle and lower income families in this country. And that's a horrifying statistic that we saw over the course of last year. But obviously, that's a direct result of this pandemic. The pandemic totally upended our economy, not just our economy, but the world's economy, and shuffled the priority between goods and services. So we weren't taking vacations. We weren't going to gyms. We weren't spending those kind of money on those kinds of things. So there's a pent-up demand for goods during the pandemic. And that's what we're seeing with this rising inflation. I'm hopeful, as the president said in his address, that we've seen 2 months of a decline in inflation. Hopefully we're seeing the worst of that through October and November. We're going to continue to see a downward trend. But this economy is still shaking through COVID, obviously with the Omicron variant as well. So there's a lot of variables up there. So obviously it's a concern for this president, not just in terms of everyday Americans in this country, but also a political concern, Shannon, as you rightly point out, with the midterms approaching.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so Steve, it is easier probably to point at the numbers, point at the data and say, okay, this is where we're at, it is not good, than it is to resolve these problems. So you're the expert here. What would your advice be to this White House and to this president?
Well, I think that, there's some truth to what Kevin is saying. The problem with that is we had a big recovery at the end of last year. And, when Trump left office, when the economy was really improving, the inflation rate wasn't 7%, it was 1.5%. So we've seen a continued acceleration of that inflation rate under Biden. Now, why is that happening? I think by far the major factor is the multi-trillions of dollars that have been spent and borrowed, and then you have the Fed accommodating that with printing all this money. And when you just deluge the economy and with all this debt spending, you're going to have inflation, just no question about it. So my advice to Joe Biden is thank God that this Build Back Better monstrosity, $5 trillion spending bill is not going to happen. I mean, that would have made inflation much, much worse. And stop the spending. We need to start cutting government spending. And the Fed, by the way, has to take a role here, too, Shannon. The Fed has been behind the curve for 9 months. They have to start raising interest rates and getting control of the money supply. And that would be my advice to Joe Biden. I hope he takes it.
Okay, we'll see. He's probably watching Fox News at night. I mean, Kevin can tell us. They're very tight, so let us know if that's the case. Okay, just another one of the Q poll numbers today. Is the economy getting better? 15% say yes. Worse, 54% say the same, 30%. So 84% of Americans that were polled say it's either the same or getting worse. Kevin, perception is reality for voters when they head to the polls. You mentioned the midterms. How do Democrats or the White House sell this right now?
Yeah, Shannon, we've got to talk about number one, as Ron Johnson did in the clip that you played, and Steve referred to. Wages are up across the board, up 4%. We're going to see that tick up. We're seeing a great employment market for those seeking jobs, seeking back to full employment coming out of the pandemic. So that's a great thing that this president can campaign on and the Democrats can campaign on. And then we also got to focus on Build Back Better. 17 Nobel laureates, to just poke a little bit at my friend Steve, has said that that bill will not increase a cent with regards to inflation in this economy. It will actually cut costs for prescription drugs.
Wow.
It will actually allow more women and single dads and those caring for children to return to the workforce, improving our supply chain because they'll have coverage for their kids. So these are all positive things that the president can move forward on if we pass Build Back Better.
Well, one of the
Kevin,
key people who's not convinced by the 17 was
how in the world?
Oh, I absolutely believe it.
$5 trillion more debt.
We got to leave it there, but I would say
lower prices.
We got to leave it there, but I will say
okay.
the 17 economists did not convince Senator Joe Manchin, and that's who you got to convince for that package.
That's
right
true.
now.
We got more work to do. We have more work to do.
Great to see you. Come back soon.
Thanks,
Good to
Shannon.
see you too. Good night.
Okay, that letter warning that parents who object at school board meetings could be domestic terrorists or something like that. Well, did the education secretary himself have more involvement than that in that letter than we've been led to believe? Hear from the woman who got her hands on emails that are telling us more of the story. She is next.